Hi, guys. My name is Joe, and welcome to Tangent Tuesday. So, this is the second Tuesday of every month where I take a topic and I just sort of go live with it and I just talk. So, the topic for this month is going to be whether or not the competition format for martial arts should reflect the breadth of the techniques. So that sounds kind of complicated. I'll get to that in a second. But first, so uh, a while ago, I set up a poll where I gave you guys the opportunity to pick which Aikido book I review first. And it was between Aikido Techniques and Tactics by Gary Bennett and Bodo Rodel's Aikido the Basics, which you could tell I'm looking at right here. Anyway, since they both had an equal number of votes, I decided to turn it into a coin toss. I have already recorded the reviews for both of them, but we're going to decide which one I'm going to do. So this is a giant novelty coin. You can see that's one of the Koopa kids. So this is going to be heads, and that's going to be for techniques and tactics. That's going to be tails, and that's going to be for the basics. Yeah, it was tails. You're going to have to trust me on that. Okay, so um, on to the topic for this month's Tangent Tuesday. So I was listening to an interview with Neil Adams by the YouTuber Chadi. Now, Chadi does a lot of stuff with the history and development of judo, and Neil Adams is an Olympic judoka from the United Kingdom. And um, after I'm finished going live, I'll go ahead and put the link in the description of the interview I'm referencing. But one thing that stood out to me when I was listening to it, the subject came up of the leg grab rule in judo. So, for those who are unfamiliar, judo has techniques where you can grab the legs. However, a few Olympics ago, the International Judo Federation had placed a blanket ban on that technique for competition. The idea behind this, as I understand it, was to make judo look less like wrestling, even though, the giant white uniforms and the chokeholds and arm locks and stuff would also distinguish it, but that's just me. So during this interview, both Shadi and Neil Adams sort of expressed the notion that they didn't mind this type of technique being excluded from judo. Now, on the surface, I can sort of understand that. Um, the the idea that let's make what we have in the Olympics look different from something else that's in the Olympics. Uh, but on a deeper level, it sort of bothered me. One thing to point out is that judo does have techniques that you would find in wrestling, like the double leg takedown in judo is called morote gari. There's also an ankle pick move whose name I can't think of right now. But there are also a lot of other moves in judo that utilize grabbing the legs, like is it kataguruma? A fireman's carry, basically. Uh, a technique that is actually sort of has a history in judo since judo's founder, Mr. Kano, Professor Kano, um, was supposed to have found it in a wrestling manual and use it to defeat someone in his jujutsu class who had been giving him trouble during randori. You can't do that move anymore. And there are some other things. There are forward throws where you load the guy onto your back and then grab his pant leg to sort of help carry him over. Can't do that anymore. So, thinking about that, it looks like competition judo is going to lose one more thing out of its arsenal. They already don't do leg locks. They don't do shoulder locks, although sometimes kind of. Um, there's a move that I would agree for safety. It's okay not to have in competition, which is a flying scissors takedown. Because if you just like launch your body at the lower body of your opponent, I can see how injuries could happen, and they have happened. Which is why the technique got banned. But leg grabs, the primary reason, I guess, leg grabs have been banned is pretty much an aesthetic one. It doesn't have anything to do with practicality. And that got me thinking of, I remember coming up in, karate. That was my first martial art. Did it for years when I was growing up. And there were techniques that were in the kata and that we use in self-defense sequences that we couldn't do in sparring. And of course, I have a much bigger gripe about our sparring format because it was what was called point stop sparring. And it was basically a game of tag. You weren't supposed to hit the guy too hard, but there would be a clash of fists and or feet, and the referee would call break, and then there would be judges who would decide if one of you scored. But there was also a tremendous list of things we couldn't do. Couldn't kick at the legs. Hook punches, even to the body, would not score because they were too close in. You had to do what was called a ridge hand, which is a big swing. Oh, my hand's in the way. With this open hand, right? Um, we couldn't come in with a hammer fist or a shuto or chop. Weren't allowed to do that. Um, and we could have probably gotten away with knees to the body. I think I've actually seen formats similar to that where they will. I mean, you're not hitting the guy anyway. Like I said, you're just touch at the most, right? So it bothered me that we couldn't do these things. Um, and then of course you take a look at things like Western wrestling. What we now know as folk style wrestling or freestyle wrestling, they have similar roots. Folk style is an American style, also known as collegiate wrestling, but they were both catch as catch can before that. And catch allowed for holds that were used for punishment. Although, I mean, there's a bit of history. There were things you could do in professional catch that you couldn't do in amateur catch. It was back when professional wrestling meant the same thing as professional boxing. They were guys who wrestled for money. They weren't jumping off of turnbuckles and hitting each other with chairs. There might have been some of that, but it wasn't normal. And then you have the case of Olympic Taekwondo, which effectively did away with punches. Taekwondo means fist foot way, right? But in the Olympic version, in order to get approved for the Olympics, they had to distinguish themselves from boxing. So technically, a punch to the body is legal, but as I understand it, nobody throws it because it never scores. And it's turned into a fantastic kicking art. But also think about how much of the art has been lost. So yeah, I guess that's just what I wanted to talk about. The thing is, when you start restricting the techniques you can use, you wind up getting very good at a much smaller skill set. So, take boxing, for instance. I think boxing is a great example, similar with Olympic Taekwondo. Before the Queensberry rules, you could hit with any part of the fist instead of just the front part, which is what you were legally allowed to hit with now. Some guys will basically throw a back fist and it's a jab. It's a back fist. But you used to be able to do what was called a chopping blow, which was either a back fist or a hammer fist. Um, They had a spinning back fist called a pivot punch. You could go for throws or trips. You could put a guy in a headlock and punch him. Can't do that under the Queensberry rules. They made a lot of restrictions. Now, unfortunately, what that means is that a lot of boxing has been lost, and we've had to sort of revive it, in the 20th and 21st centuries. On the other hand, I don't know if anyone would disagree with the idea that when it comes to pure punching, including punch defense, nobody's better than boxers. You know, you can think, well, I got harder punches, I got faster punches. Yeah, okay. In the art of I'm going to hit you and you can hit me with punches exclusively, nobody outboxes boxers. You know, and similar with Olympic Taekwondo, if we restrict everything to just kicks, who's going to be better than Olympic Taekwondo? You can say Muay Thai's got more powerful kicks, true. Most Muay Thai practitioners do not have as versatile and dexterous kicks. And we can go into like, okay, when you start adding other factors, though, that actually is a good point. That's what happens when you cut out techniques. You get really good at this one thing. But again, using the example of, Olympic Taekwondo, if you put them in a format where you allow anything in addition to kicks, life becomes a lot harder for a pure Taekwondo practitioner. What if we can kick at the legs? You're not used to that, huh? What if I can punch you in the face when you're trying to kick? That changes things. And similarly, we see, with boxing, how we see boxers in mixed competition format, like, kickboxing or mixed martial arts. They have to learn another skill. They have to go beyond the skill of boxing. But there was a time, if you took someone with the skills of a bare knuckle boxer, they would be able to adapt to some of those environments a lot better. So, I guess what it comes down to is it worth sacrificing having a broader martial art, being able to deal with more situations in order to get very good at a more limited skill set? And I guess that just comes down to what your goals are. If you want to be a good martial artist, if you want to prepare for self-defense, you need to have that more open format. If you want to get better at Olympic judo or Olympic taekwondo or competitive boxing, you don't need to do anything other than those things, right? We already have a format in which you can get good at the skills specifically for those competitions. So it still bothers me because we're losing things from martial art. Going back to judo, in its curriculum, judo has strikes. Judo has things like leg locks. We don't see those. I think you would be hard pressed to find a judo school where those things are trained regularly. Although to be fair, the strikes weren't meant to do anything except open the guy up for more grappling. But unless you're practicing the Kodokan kata, you're not even getting a chance to practice with those. So, how much of the art is being lost? How much of the skills are being lost? When was the last time you saw someone from a pure judo background who knew their way around leg locks? It's got to be a rare case. I don't know. I wish we could keep the competition format in order to get really refined at some of these skills, but also have an opportunity to train things that are outside of that. And I know that there are places that do that. Like I said, just even growing up in karate, we didn't do it a lot, but on occasion we would practice self-defense stuff, do like standing arm locks and wrist locks, and didn't get good at it, but at least we were being exposed to it. And I'm sure there are some judo schools that Here's a leg lock, by the way. Here's a morote gari, a double leg reap with the arms. You know, but I worry for the martial art. I worry that the practitioners will lose something. By the same token, every martial art changes, no matter how traditional you want to believe your your art is. They all change and evolve and adapt to whatever period they're in and adapt to whatever pressures they're under. But it does still make me a little bit sad thinking of the things that we've lost over the years. Well, I hate to leave things on a down note, but that's just sort of where I am right now. Um, if you have any thoughts on this, please leave a comment. And thank you for hanging out with me. And I will have that Aikido book up for Friday's review. Thank you very much, and I'll see you around.